I think that that's, like I was saying, that's why I really liked Vivek. I think that he understands a CEO's job. It's not to do the work itself, but he understood the parameters on what exactly he could accomplish as the president himself legally, what falls in his, on his desk and what he's capable of achieving and what he needs to do to run everything else. And I think he was already vetting people to put in his cabinet, and he was running as CEO. And that's what I would ultimately like to see, is someone who runs the government, the executive branch, as an executive, know?
Well, I really appreciated that he had that plan and he knew what was in executive powers and what was not. And he refused to say he was going to do stuff that was basically congressional jurisdiction. And I remember we were laughing at one of the primary debates when Desantis, they asked him about like housing or something. And he just basically, he was like, well, what we're going to do, I'm going to be president and we're going to lower the price of housing. And then people are going to have house. And he was just like, we're just going to do it. And it was like, what do you mean you're just going to, I didn't realize that once you got elected, you could just lower housing costs. Like no plan, no idea how to enact that, no idea if Congress is going to support him. But Vivek, he's the first one I've seen in a long time that had a plan and said, look, I'm allowed to do these things legally according to the Constitution. This is what I will do. And I can't promise you anything else, but I can tell you I will do these things because I'm allowed to.
Right. But I feel like alongside that, he also casts a vision of this is, the attitude I want to bring back to government. This is the purpose that I see us pursuing. So he did all of the vision casting CEO things that I want to see, but he also understood what his actual job was. And I'm still mourning the loss of that candidate. I understand he's not the most personable guy. Like, I can see how people would dislike him just on a person-to-person level. He talks fast. He's got a lot going on. He's fairly abrasive in some of his attacks on other candidates. Like, I can understand all of that, but at the same time, I think when you really get down to the nitty-gritty, we don't want a one-term president.
Right.
We need someone other than Trump simply for that fact.
Yeah.
We need a two-termer. We need that opportunity to actually get anything done.
Yeah.
And I think that beyond that, I lost my train of thought. I think we need a two-termer, and I think we need someone who does ruffle a few feathers, someone who is outside the Republican Party to a degree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think Vivek's you think he's going to practice and come back? Because we were talking about with the primary debates was, and I was asking people in my videos, like, what, or my comments, like, what do you not like about Vivek? And some people said he's like a flip-flopper. They say that they think that he poll tests ideas and kind of goes with whatever's popular. They feel like he flip-flops stuff. One thing that I know for certain, having watched those primaries, was he didn't understand what his tone was supposed to be. Yeah. And I think we talked about this with Desantis too. Like, the two of them did not know what, I hate to use the term character because it sounds like they're faking it, but there is kind of a persona that you need to really just focus on. Yeah. And Vivek didn't really seem to know because in the first primary, he was a little timid. It was his first one. He didn't really want to be super abrasive.
I wouldn't even say timid. I think he was trying to play the nice guy card. Like, we're not fighting each other. Yes. We're fighting someone else. Yeah.
Well, then the second primary came around, and he didn't do very good in the first one.
The second debate.
Yeah, the second debate. Mm-hmm. And he, I guess somebody on his team said, you got to be tougher. Well, then he came knives out and just was there to scrap. Mm-hmm. But he came off as petty in some of the stuff, especially when he's talking to Nikki Haley. Like, some of his remarks about her, whatever, a pig in high heels or something, or telling Chris Christie, like, just sit down, go have a meal, like making fat jokes about the guy. Like, there's being aggressive, and then there's just kind of being petty, and it's not a good look when you're just petty.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think that's where he lost it right there, is that he started to get petty with the heels joke on DeSantis. Mm-hmm. And people thought he was coming for Haley on that one, but it was DeSantis. He was attacking DeSantis. It was a joke about DeSantis boots. I think that, that's where he lost it. I don't think he did flip-flop on policy. And, and I'm sure that people could comment and tell me all the ways that I'm wrong, but I've been following his campaign for a long time, and it's something that I I pay pretty close attention to. I'm sure not as close attention as others, but it's something I am interested in. And I followed a lot of what he was saying, and I didn't see a lot of flip-flopping. Mm-hmm. I didn't see a lot of poll testing his opinions. In fact, I think he voiced a lot of opinions that were largely unpopular, like his stance on Ukraine. I don't think that most people were in his pocket on that one. I think his ideas on cutting down the size of the federal government, that was largely, I don't want to say unpopular, but I think people were nervous. What is that going to look like? Yeah. How is that even possible? So I think that gave people pause, at least with his campaign. People like the idea in general of, clearing out the swamp, but cutting out these large agencies. I think
just eliminating the FBI.
Right. I think people just saw layoffs, and unemployment going crazy. And that I think was a big drawback for his campaign, is that people just didn't want to see a bunch of people just arbitrarily without jobs because this guy came in and just hacked up what we've already got going. So I don't know. I think that didn't play well, but I don't think he changed his message. Mm-hmm. I think he changed his delivery. Yeah. And I think people didn't like the persona he took on.
So what do you think is his, if he comes back in 4 years, what do you think is his best persona? What does he need to portray the most and stay focused on that is going to make him the most successful? Because for a while he was doing you liked the family thing. Because we have a big family, right? We have 6 kids. So when he was make families cool again or whatever, he did that for 2 weeks. That was his message, was make families cool again. We're like, yes. And then I guess it didn't work. I don't know. But he didn't bring that up anymore, and he really did. You're right. His tone was just he was testing those tones to see which particular message resonated the best.
But again, I think that was persona, not policy. Yeah. But you're right. I guess he did push different things at different times, but I don't think I ever heard him actually flip-flop on his objectives. Yeah.
So what do you think is his best? Do you think he needs to come out and be more of a fighter? Do you think he needs to do the whole policy wonk, nerdy biotech CEO, I'm just about the numbers? Is that the persona that he needs to pursue? What do you think is going to make him successful next time?
So I think what really spoke to me, you're right, was the make families cool again. And it's not because we have a large family. It's because I believe that that's our best form of governance is at home. I think that's where it all begins. That's where it starts. And we've got to give families the freedom to govern their own families. Yeah. Obviously, horrible behaviors withstanding, but you know what I'm saying. I think that government starts at home. Yeah. Community starts at home. And that's what we've got to restore in this country, is allowing people to govern their own homes. So I think he goes with that. And I think what's really strong about him is how clever he is. And that sounds really stupid and petty, but he is quick on his feet. Mm-hmm. He makes decisions relatively rapidly, but it never feels uninformed. Generally, it's what I appreciate about you, is that he takes in information quickly and he can process it relatively quickly and come to a good conclusion. And I think he's always open to outside information. He understands his position. I think what works for him is that he's clever. And I think that that's the role that he needs to play, is that I know what I'm talking about. Yeah. I think he should have argued more about how Trump only has one term. That really bothers me. As a voter, I wouldn't vote for Trump simply because I know that we need someone else. We need someone who's got a solid 8 years, because you can't turn this barge in 4 years. No. You just can't. Not without going full scorched earth. And I think that's something that really worries people about Trump, is they're he's angry, right? Because I think there are ways you could say he's been wronged. People have just come after him. And I think he's going to go a little scorched earth, and if he wins, and he's going to piss a lot of people off, erode trust in government even more than it already is eroded. And I think that, I hate to use the word he's dangerous, but I think he's going to go, he's going to try to get stuff done in that 4 years, and it's going to have to be extreme. So you're absolutely right to get anything meaning, but
all he can do is like executive order type stuff, which we saw with Joe Biden. Joe Biden came and was like, oh, cool, I'll just repeal everything you did. So then, oh, great. What have you accomplished? You know what I mean?
That is the problem. And that's where I think Vivek really shined, is that he understood the job. He understood what was even possible legally, what he could actually get accomplished. And I think he should have made that more of his platform.
Yeah. Now with DeSantis, we've talked, he had the wrong character too. He did not know what he wants to be is tough. He wants to be a fighter. Yeah. He wants to be, what that guy used to call himself? Renegade? No, was it Renegade? Who was the McCain? What was his
Maverick?
Maverick, that's what it was. Yeah. DeSantis wants to be Mr. Maverick. He wants to be a fighter, cowboy, tough guy, new sheriff in town. He tried to make his whole campaign basically about fighting the wokesters and like how,
he bucked the system.
Right. Woke liberals are taking over America and I'm here to stop them. The Marshals here to stop the wokeness. And I thought from the beginning, I made videos about it last year, that like, this is not going to work. Your fight against Disney is not going to translate to a countrywide election where people care. Florida, I think, cared. I think Floridians were with him on the Parents' Rights Education Bill, or what they were calling the Don't Say Gay Bill. I think his fight against Disney and their tax exemptions and stuff, that was very popular with Floridians. It was very popular with culture warriors. But then he and his team clearly thought, cool, we can take this tough guy image fighting the woke left and we can take it to the national stage. And that does not translate because, like we said earlier, he didn't have any policy ideas. Well, what's weird is, like you said, you listen to interviews with him and he's like a total nerd.
Yeah, he's very dorky.
He's a policy wonk.
Yeah.
And so then he got on stage after having these tough guy ads and, I'm going to take on the wokes and all this. Then they would ask him questions and he's like the most boring, lukewarm human being imaginable. And he's not living up to the gunslinger persona that he wants to have.
Yeah, he wants to come across as a cowboy, but I think he thought his military service would translate. I think he thought, I'm a veteran and people are going to see me as this, Navy SEAL, like badass kind of guy. And I think that's how, and then you find out he was an attorney.
Right.
And that's not to disparage his service. I mean, I'm sure he's, all our military servicemen have been through it. Like there's just no arguing.
There's a certain image when people think of when people think of service, they're thinking of bearded macho dude in fatigues in the desert. Like that's what they picture, right?
Yeah.
And that's not what he was.
He's
so
a
it just
lawyer.
didn't match up.
Right. He's a lawyer. And I think that, he just chose the wrong persona. I think that he wanted to be a cowboy. He wanted everybody to see how he was how during COVID, he bucked the system and he was the only one brave enough to take on Disney and take on all these woke policies in Florida. And he did do all of those things, but I think he'd have been better off to explain why.
Yeah.
Because he had data to back up what he was doing.
Yeah.
This is what my constituency wants.
Yeah.
And so this is what I'm going to give them. And I think he probably would be better off to just run on that and say, I'm your candidate.
Mm-hmm.
I fought for the people of Florida. I gave them what they wanted. And I'm willing to do that as the U.S. president as well.
Yeah. Yeah, if he tries to come back, and I think everybody thought he was the next heir apparent. Like, yes. I think he thought it. I think his team thought it. I think a lot of people in the RNC thought it. That very much like Mitt Romney was just clearly obviously he was the RNC's pick. 2 years before the election, everybody was like, oh yeah, it's gonna be Mitt. Like that's clearly the pick. And I think that DeSantis was he felt the same way. Like, it's his turn. He was successful as Florida governor. He did make a lot of headlines with his fight against Disney, or also the fight against immigration and stuff, when he bussed a bunch of immigrants up to Martha's Vineyard or whatever, right? And that was a big show, grandstand thing. So he had a lot of popularity from stuff like that. And I think he was pretty popular with conservatives. And so, he just figured cool, it's my turn.
My turn, yeah.
And everybody I think everybody thought Trump was going to crash and burn.
Yeah.
They just figured, look, these investigations are going to take him down. They're going to find something.
They were banking on it.
Yeah. Basically, we're all just going to wait in the wings for him to crash. And then, whoop, we will be there. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. Which is so such a sad way to just like, hey, when your boyfriend cheats, I'll be there, baby. Don't worry.
That's right.
The voters have him friend zoned, but he's waiting.
I think that Desantis did think he was the heir apparent. And I think that the RNC made it very clear early on that he was their pick. He was the heir apparent. In their eyes as well. But I think that everybody keeps saying he has no charisma on stage. I hate Adam Sosnick with every fiber of my being. But he says it all the time. He doesn't have any riz, he doesn't have any, he has no personality on stage. No. None at all. In interviews, he's terrible. And I think that part of that is because, and he comes across to me, and I've always said this, I've heard Candace Owens say this, he comes across as disingenuous. He comes across as phony. And I think that's because he's trying really hard to look like this badass motherfucker who is gonna bust down the walls and he's taking over government by force, and he's none of those things. No. He's like a CPA, but I don't think that's innately a bad thing. I don't think that's something that I think it's something people could vote for. I think he just has to be genuine. He has to be who he is.
You got to sell that.
Yes, exactly. You have to sell that correctly. And I think that his team missed out on a whole lot of marketing opportunities, going to the podcasts, getting the eyeballs really. And the eyeballs are on the internet. It's not on public television. You know what I mean? Yeah. Cable television.
Well, you mentioned Adam Sosnick, who's on the Patrick Bet David podcast, which you love, and he did
Except for him. I hate him.
Right. Oh, I can't stand him. And the audience hates him too. Like, if you go read the comments, everybody hates this guy. I don't understand what he's doing there. Sometimes I think it's just hate clicks. Like, people just want to watch. Maybe they keep him on just because people hate him.
Because people hate him.
I don't understand the economics of it, but it's got to work.
He contributes almost nothing.
PBD's doing well, so he's got to be doing something right. But you said that PBD tried to have him on, and he never could get on, right?
He eventually did. He eventually did come on the PBD podcast, and it did not go well. So he came off real bad. It was very poor performance for him.
I think you're right, though, that like I've been seeing this on YouTube and stuff. People are kind of talking about how like the mainstream media just doesn't have the same influence that they used to, and DeSantis is kind of old. He's sort of old guard with that. Like, he thinks Fox News is going to carry him. He thinks that going on interviews on CNN, Fox News.
Well, in his defense, that's where a large portion of voters are at, is on Fox News. I mean, I think he's from Florida. You got to think, what is the Florida demographic? I mean, it's largely older people.
Like we said, though, that's Florida, but his campaign did not translate nationwide. True. And you've brought up that, like, meeting the voters, like, in these smaller settings, that's where it's going to be at going forward. Like, the corporate media is just starting to lose influence. Joe Rogan has more influence than Megyn Kelly or Tucker Carlson ever did. Going on Tim Pool, going on PBD, going on these various podcasts, that's where it's at. And it's much more personable. Like, you have the chance to look like a real person instead of a 2-3 minute interview where you just got to say as many buzzwords as you possibly can. And Vivek was on the podcast.
Vivek would talk to anybody. You got to give him credit. RFK too.
RFK was on. Yeah, he would go talk to anybody.
Anybody. Some of the small channels I saw those people on, I was just astounded. They would talk to anybody.
Mm-hmm. And I think that maybe this year it didn't. Obviously, RFK is not doing as well. He's obviously not going to be challenging Joe Biden, and Vivek did drop out. But I think that you're seeing that new media gain import big time, where people are, the trust in corporate media is at its lowest ever, and people are tuning into podcasts more and more. I mean, years ago, podcasts were like this niche thing. Everybody's like, oh, okay, podcasting, right. Yeah. But now you've got Joe Rogan just signed like a $250 million contract with Spotify. I mean, these things are massive. These people are making tons of money, and people are listening to these opinions, and these candidates better realize that if they don't engage socially like that, if they don't take a hint from Trump, like, I think a lot of his victory was attributed to social media. He understood how to use social media in a way that none of the other Republicans knew how to use it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that what these guys also have to consider is that the old generation is aging out. You know what I mean? They're voters for the next 10, 15 years, and then you've got to deal with millennials and Gen Xers. Yeah. And we're consuming media in a very different way than our predecessor generations. And I think that,
Gen Z, I think, is voting. I mean, well, I don't know what the years are, but I think older Gen Z is voting age at this point.
Absolutely.
They're in their early to mid 20s now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that they've got to understand that there's a shift happening here. And those of us who are, they've always complained about us millennials, but we're all pushing 40 at this point. And so, we're in our mid to late 30s and we're we're who they should be marketing to now, because we're the voters of the future.
We're the next boomers. Well, no, Gen X is in front of us there, but oh my God, getting old.
Yeah.